It's Saturday, and welcome to another episode of PO Cubed, your chronological guide to Nintendo's handheld consoles. My name's DD Ash, and this week we're playing Racing Damashii, World Circuit Series, The Game of Harmony, NBA All-Star Challenge, and Doraemon, Taiketsu Himitsu Dogu. Let's start the show.
Game Boy Color. 子供たちにも新しいゲームの世界にチャレンジさせたい。モバイルアダプタ GB 誕生。ポケモンクリスタルの世界がパワーアップ。お求めはご覧のお店で。サインボール当たります。
Racing Damashii, DMG-RDJ, developed and published by IREM. If you don't count Motocross Maniacs, which was more of a stunt trial game, this is the first motorbike racing game on the Game Boy. Damashii can be translated as Spirit. This also came out on PC Engine, again in Japan only. At first glance, the game appears to be a quickly slapped together kind of thing, and the lack of a Western release would validate that idea somewhat. The graphics don't appear to have had much attention given to them. The music is ill-considered nonsense, and that engine sound, ugh. This has to be the whiniest racing game I've ever heard. Going back to the overall look of the game for a second, one of the key things to getting the image of a Game Boy game right is full use of the screen. With only 23,000 pixels to choose from, that sounds like a lot, but believe me, it isn't. You cannot afford screen wastage. Here, around half of the screen in total is taken up by various speedometers and gauges, leaving the track in the middle section with little room for detail. The bikes, while proportionally fine, are therefore really small, with yours standing out from the competitors by simply being a lighter shade. However, once you play a few rounds of the game, this starts to make a little sense. Despite the dimensions, the overall impression of speed is excellent, with some nice track blurring, and yeah, the sound is piercing as hell, but the pitch slide certainly adds to this effect. In-game, you need to switch between low and high gear, and when I first started off, the sound actually reminded me to shift a few times. Using headphones, you can actually detect a low rumble beneath the whines, so it's not as bad as it first appears. There are 4 different bikes to choose from, all of which have slightly different stats. There's a practice mode as well as a 2-player, but the game really shines in its championship mode, which takes you through a season of real-life racetracks, mostly from Japan. Suzuka and Tsukuba are amongst the names I recognized, and the layouts are pretty accurate. At the end of each race, you can put a handful of points into your bike's stats, choosing one of 4 areas: top speed, power, body, and tire. Power is your acceleration rate, body is how much damage you can take, and tire is how long you can go without needing to pit. Win a race and you get 2 lots of bonus points, and different bikes have various upper thresholds that are shown on the selection screen. For instance, the first bike has an initial top speed of 262 km per hour, while the second choice is 270. You do actually find yourself getting involved with the season, which goes to show that the concept works here. So, onto the most important aspect of any racing game, the controls. If you've ever played Road Rash, you'll have experienced the thrill of the centrifugal force effect, whereby you steer slightly into the corner and then ease off, so that you don't fall off the bike, letting the curve of the bend take you all the way round, pulling you to the outside. On the faster bikes in those games, the tumble point, as I like to call it, is an important marker to get a feeling of, knowing how much you can turn into a corner without the bike chucking you off. This is very present in Racing Damashii as well. Sure, the bail animation isn't as fluid or hilarious as in Road Rash. In fact, all your momentum strangely stops and you drift to the outside of the bend, but the physics are certainly there. It's quite easy to get a feel for it, and pretty soon you'll find yourself artfully feathering the D-pad to fly around these tracks without really taking your finger off the accelerate button. It's important to do as well, because taking any damage by falling off or hitting another rider reduces your body gauge, which lowers your top speed. Maybe the game doesn't look or sound the best, but it's still great fun with wonderful controls and a great difficulty curve. As you get faster, the game gets harder, so that you're not only battling the other racers, but also the death trap between your legs. It really does feel like a stripped-down version of Road Rash. Everything is on a flat plane in the same way that F1 races, and I was at first disappointed that there were no cars and cows to dodge, nor could you bludgeon your rivals to death with a billy club. But then you remember that this is a straight-up racing game, and those things don't actually exist in MotoGP. World Circuit Series DMG-FZ, developed by Konami and published by Konami in Japan and Europe, and Ultra Games in North America. Konami aren't necessarily known for racing games, but they did exist. World Circuit Series suggests to me that it wasn't a great area of interest for them, however, as it's one that's sort of forgotten in the annals of time. Well, my philosophy is no game left behind, so let's give it some page space. You get a lot of options to customize your racing experience. You can choose F3000, Formula 3, or Formula 1, which basically governs the overall speed of the cars, but also decides the difficulty of the tracks you'll be racing on. In Formula 3, you won't even have to brake for a lot of it, but in F1 it's much easier to crash and is pretty tough. You can then choose one of two preset cars. They're both at opposite extremes, as in one is slow and handles well, the other fast but a shopping cart. So instead you're better off creating your own team. You can choose various aspects of your car, from downforce, which affects the control, your tyres and engine, and so on. It's possible to practice tracks, have a single race, and in the World Series mode you plough through an entire season, firstly qualifying for each track, and then a 3-lap race. So plenty of choice there. Unfortunately, the gameplay isn't really what it could have been. There's a large information bar on the right-hand side that shows a map, your speed dial, and lap times. The map is kind of irrelevant as your current position isn't shown, and it's too far out of your line of sight to even look at it. I've never been a massive fan of these racing games where the tracks aren't actually circuits. Here you're always heading towards the top of the screen, navigating left and right like one of those old Tomy racing turbo toys we all used to have. Compare this to something like Micro Machines, where you drive around in all directions, to see how a top-down racer should probably be done. The car controls in a very sliding manner. You can seemingly straighten up the car only to have it still gently veer off to the side, requiring another single tap of the D-pad to actually travel directly upwards. This is greatly exacerbated by the level of tyre wear. After a couple of laps, your car is often nigh uncontrollable. Also, what's the deal with the engine failures all the time? It seems that in almost half the races you can be way out in front, only for your engine to give in, dramatically cutting your top speed and leaving you in your opponent's dust. You can pit to get it repaired, but having to make a pit stop basically ends your race, as none of the other drivers ever seem to. Another really weird facet to the programming is that none of the cars have collision detection attributed to them. You can crash into obstacles on the sides of the track, and later on you will do, trust me, but all the cars sort of ghost through each other as if they're racing the same track but in different dimensions. I imagine trying to overtake would be a massive pain in the arse if this wasn't the case though. The music and engine sounds are genuinely brilliant. It's perfect racing music with a fast bass line and soaring melody, although more variation would have been good. Compared to Racing Damashii, it's a massive improvement. The look is a little rushed, I think. All the cars look identical and there's very little variation, but what's there is professional at least. The pit and podium animations are a nice touch. You'd expect no less from a Konami title. World Circuit Series is certainly not the worst racing game out there, but there are too many irritants for my liking, and I really don't enjoy the design choice of always heading upwards. That's fine if the camera aspect is behind the car, as in F1 Race, but it doesn't really suit a top-down perspective. The Game of Harmony DMG-GH, developed by the Code Monkeys and published by Accolade. A North American exclusive, The Game of Harmony is a port of a late 80s game by the assembly line called E-Motion, or sometimes known as Sphericule. You control a spaceship, well, it's a white circle with a black arrow inside it, and need to nudge or otherwise corral pairs of darker circles together and make them touch. They then eliminate, with the aim of each level to get rid of all pairs. There are 3 colours of globe to match up. They have a triangle, diamond or square inside on the Game Boy version, and if 2 non-matching globes come into contact with each other, they spawn smaller globules of the 3rd type. So for instance, if a square touches a triangle, small diamond pods will be generated. You can collect these while they're still small for a little health bonus, otherwise they'll eventually turn into normal-sized ones. The globes are somewhat volatile. If you don't match them up in time, they explode and damage your ship. This isn't necessarily death, but it does so much damage that it's as good as. Some can be connected by strings which kind of drag each other around, but an interesting game mechanic is that the levels wrap around in all 4 directions. If a circle or your ship goes off the top of the screen, it will appear in the bottom of the screen, similar to how it works in Asteroids. It may take a little time to wrap your head around. Cheap pun, sorry. The selling point of the game is the kinetics involved. Your ship's controls are polar, whereby holding left or right rotates the ship and A propels you forward. You can flip over 180 degrees by pressing B, and the movement is very momentum-based. Objects collide and interact with each other very realistically, with velocities transferring in an accurate particulate fashion. There are 50 levels of ever-increasing difficulty, each with solid sections in various shapes acting as obstacles. Half the challenge is driving your craft without crashing. You don't take damage, but you pinball all over the place, which can send you careering into orbs that you didn't mean to, resulting in a load of spawns that you just don't have time to get rid of. Movement isn't exactly smooth or rapid either, due to the limitations of the system. This game was probably biggest and most successful on home computers. ZX Spectrum, Atari ST, Commodore 64, and MS-DOS all had good ports. The amount of moving and interacting objects on screen was probably too much of a computational stretch for the memory of our little handheld buddy. Not only is it very cramped and tough to make out pairs, but also means no memory could be spared for in-game music. The sound effects are as basic as they come and pretty nasty. Moreover though, when there are 7 or 8 pairs of globes, all of which need to interact independently with each other object on screen, as well as your own ship, there are just too many calculations for the Game Boy to cope with, and it renders the Game of Harmony way too slow and sluggish to play with any level of success. A nice game on paper, and on computers, but this port doesn't really work. NBA All-Star Challenge DMG-AC, developed by Beam Software and published by LJN. Choose your superstar and take on the All-Star Challenge in this one-on-one basketball game based on the NBA 1991-92 season. There are lots of different players to choose from in-game. I believe there's someone from each team in the league from that season. Pick your favourite and your opponent, then choose from 5 different styles of play. The first game is a one-on-one challenge, whereby you and your opponents try to score a basket. One person starts with the ball and the other on defense. If you have the ball, press A to jump and then again when you're at the optimal height. The height depends on your distance from the net, and you'll obviously need to learn it yourself. Slam dunks are possible as well if you're in the correct position, but for some reason you press B to do this rather than A. While on defense, press A to attempt a block and B to try and steal. If you jump and don't shoot, you get called up for travelling. There are other penalties as well. It's possible to charge at a defending player or block an attacker, as well as running out of shot time. There's a free throw competition which you play on your own. There's a crosshair moving around the backboard, and you have to fight against it somewhat to get it smack bang in the centre. There's only one spot where you can make the shot. This will keep you entertained for all of a minute at best. Thirdly, you can play a game of horse, which is where you and your opponent alternate shots from various places around the court, trying not to miss. Every time either one of you misses a basket, you get another letter from the word horse. If you completely spell out the word, you lose. You start the game and must first choose a place on the court to shoot from, make the shot, and your opponent then has to try to make the same shot from that place. If he does, then you go again from a different spot. A similar game mode is the accuracy shootout. This plays basically the same as horse, except this time you're playing against the clock instead of an opponent. You need to make as many shots as possible within the time limit. That's it. You can select whether to choose your own spots or have to aim from randomly designated marks. Tournament mode is the same as the one-on-one mode, but you choose 8 players instead of 2, and the game proceeds in a knockout tournament until a winner is crowned. That's the whole affair right there. The intro music is nice, but there's nothing in-game, which feels very empty. Graphically, the game is a letdown. There's only one court with the barest minimum level of detail. Pretty much just lines on the court. There aren't any discernible differences between the characters. They all look the same height in-game, and they all play identically, which is a bit of a shame. I won't be losing a great deal of sleep over that though. All-Star Challenge may have provided a small degree of novelty for basketball fans, but other than that, there's little appeal. So much so that I can't even be bothered to think of a witty pun to finish the review. Pass.
Konnichiwa. 僕ドラえもんの冒険がゲームになりました。空気砲にどこでもドア、左マントに取り寄せバッグ、おなじみの秘密道具を使って大冒険の始まりです。ドラえもん12月12日新発売。
by Addison.
Doraemon Taiketsu Himitsu Dogu DMG-DEJ, developed by Epoch and SAS Sakata and published by Epoch. One day, Doraemon and Nobita were playing with a time machine computer with their friends when all of a sudden smoke started pouring out of it. It exploded, knocking poor Doraemon out. When he came to, he found himself in a mysterious maze. Here, he meets a Chibi Cat angel who asks for his help in finding the angel's missing friends. In exchange, the angel will help you look for your special tool, stop it, which Doraemon can use to get home. You walk along these paths that look like really long scrolls floating in space. There are monsters with you which are instant death on contact, though you can use an extendable power glove to punch some of them away. Hidden about the maze are these doors, some of which teleport you elsewhere, others which you need to peek in. You're looking for 3 missing angel things that'll help you return home. If it's a wrong door, Doraemon will complain that it's a really messy room and nothing will happen. In one such door, the angel will appear and tell you that you can see where else to go by pressing select. This then brings up a useful radar. Behind some doors, the angel will tell you that he saw something circular. Doraemon exclaims this must be his special tool, and you enter a vertically scrolling shoot-'em-up. You only have the punch attack at first, though this can be upgraded to an actual gun or a powerful boomerang that can take out multiple enemies. There's also a rapid-fire gun that's extremely powerful. You can collect a shield that can absorb several hits, and you can jump to avoid stuff. Get to the end of these stages, no small task, believe me, and there'll be yet another door, in which will be a reward. This could be extra lives, or it could be part of the tool you're looking for. The cool thing you'll find if you survive these stages is, whatever weapon you were holding at the end, you now have on the maze screen, greatly helping your progress in this overworld area. The vertical shoot-'em-up stages aren't the only ones. Occasionally you'll find a horizontally scrolling one as well. The same concept applies here, with more emphasis on having to jump. It's impressive that they managed to create 2 pretty good interpretations of both 2D shoot-'em-up variants. Doraemon had way more than his fair share of Game Boy titles. Granted, a lot of them were study guides released late in the Game Boy's life, but that is testament to what a popular character he is. Aside from those kanji and mathematics cartridges, he also had a small collection of what turned out to be surprisingly good games. Don't worry too much if you can't read the story here, as it's not that difficult to elicit what you need to do just by wandering around. Doraemon Secret Doggy Showdown was a really pleasant surprise, one that I played to completion. Thanks for listening to the Portable Power Podcast. If you want to support the show, the best way to do so is on Patreon at patreon.com/portablepowerpodcast. Or subscribe on the YouTubes. We have daily uploads Monday to Friday, where you can watch me suck at the games as I talk about them. You can tweet me at POCubed or on any of the other socials you might expect. Thanks again and have a great weekend.